I'm 54 now, the kind of man who pretends he's fine because the bills get paid and the lawn gets mowed on Saturdays. I've got a steady job at the municipal office, a marriage that looks stable from the outside, and a son who calls when he remembers. Most days I move through life like I'm wearing a coat I can't take off. Functional, familiar, a little too heavy. Last Tuesday, a plain envelope showed up in my mailbox, wedged between a pizza flyer and something from the bank. No return address. My name written in ink that had faded to the color of weak tea. The paper felt wrong in my hands. Too thin, too old. Like it had been waiting in a drawer for decades and only now remembered it had a destination. Inside was a letter dated 35 years ago. I actually laughed at first, like my brain tried to make it a joke before it had to make it real. Then I saw the signature. The way the J hooked under the line like it was trying to hold on. And it hit me. There are things you don't get over. You just get better at walking around them. I sat down right there in the hallway, coat still on, and stared at words meant for a version of me that didn't exist anymore. In 1990, I was 19 and convinced the world was a straight line. Work hard, keep your head down, don't trust anyone too much. Jamie was the opposite. He laughed with his whole body, like he couldn't believe we got to be alive at the same time as cheap beer and summer storms. We were inseparable, two idiots on bikes, cutting behind the football field to smoke and talk about leaving our town like it was a sinking ship. The mistake started small. A scholarship envelope went missing from the guidance office, the one with my name on it. Full ride to a trade program in Gdansk. I'd been working nights at the petrol station, saving coins in a jar, telling myself I'd finally outrun my dad's reputation. The rumor machine did what it always does in a place where nothing happens. Someone said they saw Jamie near the office. Someone else said he'd been desperate lately. It lined up too neatly with my fears. Jamie's mom was sick. His house always smelled like boiled cabbage and medicine, and he joked once about robbing the school for tuition. So when the principal called me in and asked if I knew anything, I didn't defend him. Worse, I fed it. I said, if anyone could get in there, it's Jamie. I watched their faces harden like wet cement, and I told myself I was just being honest. Things unraveled fast after that. Like someone kicked a chair out from under both of us and only I knew why. Jamie was pulled out of class 2 days later. By Friday, everyone knew. By Monday, his locker was empty. Officially, they said administrative issues. Unofficially, he was a thief who got lucky enough not to be charged. Small towns love a quiet ending. He didn't come looking for me. That's the part that still stings. I expected yelling, fists, something loud enough to make me feel justified. Instead, he vanished. His bike stayed locked behind his house for weeks, rust creeping up the chain like it was settling in. His mom died that winter. I didn't go to the funeral. I told myself it would make things worse. Truth is, I didn't want to be seen. The scholarship was found a month later, misfiled in a cabinet. By then, it didn't matter. The committee said the delay made me ineligible. Too many questions, too much mess. I stayed, took shifts wherever I could. People clapped my shoulder and said things like, "You did the right thing," or "That kid was trouble anyway." My parents looked relieved. Teachers smiled at me like I'd passed some invisible test. And every time someone said Jamie's name, it felt like swallowing a coin. I learned early that you can win an argument and still lose something you can't replace. Life didn't pause for my guilt. It just learned to live beside it. I moved apartments, then cities, then into a marriage that felt safe because it didn't ask too many questions. I told the Jamie story once or twice over the years, edited down to something palatable. We drifted apart. Bad crowd. People nodded. No one ever pushed. Every few years, something small would crack it open. A bike chained to a fence. The smell of boiled cabbage in an old stairwell. A laugh that sounded like it came from the chest instead of the throat. I'd feel that same tightening, like my body remembered before my mind could interfere. I searched for him exactly once, late at night, after too much whiskey and a rough fight with my wife. Nothing came up. No social media. No record I could find. It was easier to decide he didn't want to be found. Easier than admitting I didn't deserve to. Decades passed like that, quietly. I became the reliable one, the man people trusted with keys and secrets. I gave advice to my son about standing up for his friends, about doing the right thing even when it's hard. Every word tasted faintly bitter. Time doesn't heal everything. Sometimes it just buries it deep enough that you forget where you left the shovel. The letter shouldn't have existed. The postmark was smeared but readable if you tilted it toward the light. 1990. Same town. Same month, everything fell apart. It had been stamped, sorted, and somehow never delivered, like it missed its cue and waited 35 years for a second chance. I didn't open it right away. I made coffee. I fed the cat. I stood at the sink watching my reflection in the dark window, half expecting 19-year-old me to stare back, furious and hopeful all at once. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. That scared me more than the letter itself. When I finally slid a finger under the flap, the paper inside crackled softly, brittle with age. The smell hit first: dust, ink, something metallic. It felt intimate in a way emails never do, like I was trespassing in someone else's past. Before I read a single word, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it ring out. Then a voicemail notification. No message, just dead air and a faint sound at the end, breathing maybe or wind. That's when I understood this wasn't coincidence. The past hadn't just resurfaced. It had come looking for me, patient and unignorable, carrying words I was never meant to hear so late in life. I unfolded the letter slowly, terrified it might tear, like the truth itself was fragile after all this time. The handwriting was unmistakable. Jamie's letters always leaned right, like they were in a hurry to be understood. My chest tightened so hard I had to sit on the kitchen floor, back against the cabinet, the cold seeping through my shirt. The first line wasn't angry. That was the shock. It wasn't desperate either. It was calm, almost careful. He wrote like someone who had already accepted something I hadn't even begun to face. My name looked wrong on the page, like it belonged to a stranger who borrowed my life. I kept waiting for the accusation, the proof of my betrayal spelled out in ink. Instead, I felt something worse crawling up my spine. Fear that I had misunderstood everything, that the story I'd lived with for decades was built on sand. Halfway through the first paragraph, my vision blurred. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I was going to ruin the letter with tears and that would somehow be another betrayal. My heart raced, then stuttered, like it couldn't decide if this was a threat or a gift. I hadn't even reached the part where he explained why he was writing. And already, the version of myself I'd protected for 35 years was starting to crack, quietly, without drama, the way bones do before you feel the pain. The letter asked me to call him. Not immediately, not urgently, just, if you ever read this, I hope you'll hear me out. There was a phone number written at the bottom, one I recognized only because it used the old local exchange. It felt impossible that it could still work. It felt worse that it might. I stared at my phone for an hour before dialing. When it rang, my throat closed. When someone picked up, I almost hung up. The voice on the other end was older, slower, but I knew it the way you know a scar by touch. "Hello?" he said, cautious, not accusing. That alone knocked the air out of me. I said his name like a question. There was a pause, then a soft exhale, like he'd been bracing for impact for decades. "I wondered," he said. "Didn't think it would be this late." We talked around things at first. Weather, work. He asked about my parents. I asked where he was calling from. He didn't answer directly. Every sentence felt like stepping onto ice you weren't sure would hold. Then he said, "You probably think I'm calling to blame you." I opened my mouth to apologize, finally. But he cut in gently. "Just listen. There's something you never knew." And in that moment, I realized the letter wasn't an ending. It was an invitation to finally understand what I'd helped destroy. Jamie told me the scholarship was never stolen. Not by him, not by anyone. The guidance counselor had been skimming mail that year, quietly pulling envelopes for kids she thought would waste the opportunity. She'd been caught years later, after I'd already built a life on the wreckage. My letter had been misplaced during the investigation, sealed as evidence, forgotten in a box when the case closed. Jamie found out by accident while working maintenance for the district, years after he'd already left town carrying the blame. Here's the part that made my hands go numb. Jamie never tried to clear his name because he thought I'd turned on him to save myself. He believed I'd chosen my future over him. And because of that, he figured the truth didn't matter anymore. The town had already decided who he was. So he left, took care of his mother until the end, worked whatever jobs would take him, built a quiet life that didn't ask for forgiveness. The letter I held was the one he wrote the night before he left town. He wrote that he didn't hate me. That hurt worse. He wrote that he hoped I got out, that maybe one of us should. I had spent 35 years believing I survived something. I was wrong. I'd been spared. After we hung up, the house felt unfamiliar, like I'd broken into my own life. Every choice I'd made suddenly had a second shadow, one that followed Jamie instead of me. The job I settled for, the marriage I slid into because it felt earned. The stories I told myself about being practical instead of brave. They all rearranged themselves around the truth. I looked at my son's high school photo on the fridge and felt sick. I taught him that loyalty was negotiable if the stakes were high enough. That silence could pass for innocence. I wondered how many times I'd mistaken my caution for integrity. Sleep didn't come. When it did, it was thin and crowded with memories that refused to stay buried. I kept hearing Jamie's voice, not bitter, not angry, just tired. That was somehow worse. Anger I could have met. Exhaustion felt like a verdict. At work, I stared at forms and signatures, thinking about all the times I'd been trusted to tell the truth. All the times I'd chosen the version that kept me comfortable. The letter sat folded in my wallet, heavy as a stone, proof that the life I was proud of had been built on a moment of cowardice. You can live with a lie for decades, but the truth only needs one night to take everything apart. NAL conflict. We agreed to meet 3 days later. A cafe off the highway, neutral ground, like we were negotiating a ceasefire instead of a past. I arrived early and sat with my back to the wall, heart pounding like I was 19 again and about to be called into the principal's office. When he walked in, I barely recognized him. Taller, thinner, hair gone gray in uneven patches. But the way he scanned the room, quick, alert, ready to leave, was the same. When our eyes met, something in me collapsed. I stood up too fast and knocked my chair over. No one laughed. "I should have defended you," I said, before he even sat down. The words came out ugly and loud. Heads turned. I didn't care. I should have said something. I let them ruin you. Jamie didn't flinch. That somehow made it worse. He set his cup down carefully, like he was buying time. "You were scared," he said. "So was I." That's when it hit me. He wasn't here to absolve me. He was here to tell the truth. I felt anger flare, sharp and misplaced. At the school, at the counselor, at myself for still wanting forgiveness instead of understanding. My hands shook. I realized I'd carried this moment my whole life, and it wasn't going to end with relief. Jamie told his story without drama, like he'd rehearsed it until it no longer hurt to say out loud. After the accusation, the looks changed first. Teachers stopped meeting his eyes. Friends kept conversations short, like guilt was contagious. When his mom got worse, the school suggested he take time away. Sounded kind. It wasn't. He said the worst part wasn't losing the scholarship rumors or the town. It was losing me without a fight. "If you'd yelled at me," he said quietly, "I could have survived that. But you watched." He admitted he'd waited weeks for me to show up, to knock on the door, to ask. When I didn't, he decided that was his answer. So he took night buses to hospital shifts with his mom, then construction jobs, then janitorial work for the district years later. That's when he learned the truth about the counselor. Overheard it in a storage room like it was gossip, not a life. He found my address once, wrote the letter, then convinced himself it would only reopen wounds that had already scarred wrong. So he mailed it anyway, telling himself the universe would decide. We sat there in silence after that. Not hostile, just heavy. Two men holding the same past from opposite ends, finally seeing how much weight it really had. The breaking point came when Jamie reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, even older than the letter. My handwriting, crooked, rushed, unmistakable. A note I'd written him the week before everything collapsed, joking about escaping town together, promising I had his back no matter what. "I kept this," he said. His voice cracked for the first time. "Because I needed proof that I hadn't imagined us." Something inside me finally gave way. Not a neat confession, not a controlled apology. I cried the way adults aren't supposed to. Shoulders shaking, breath hitching, hands over my face like I could physically hold myself together. People stared. The waitress hovered, unsure. I didn't care. "I was a coward," I said into my palms. "I chose silence because it protected me. I let you carry it alone." Jamie didn't rush to comfort me. He let it happen. That mattered. When he finally spoke, his words landed heavier than anger ever could. "I don't need you to hate yourself," he said. "I needed you to know what it cost." I looked at him then, really looked, and understood the twist of it all. The letter hadn't come to change my past. Came to make sure I couldn't lie about it anymore. And in that moment, stripped of excuses, I felt something close to forgiveness, but not from him. From the truth. When we stood to leave, there was no cinematic hug, no promise to make up for lost time. Just an awkward pause where 35 years hovered between us, waiting to see what we'd do next. I told him I wanted to make things right. The words felt small the moment they left my mouth. Jamie nodded, slow and careful. "I'm not looking for a redo," he said. "I just didn't want to be the only one who remembered." That changed something in me. I realized resolution didn't mean fixing the past. It meant carrying it honestly. I asked him what he needed now, not what I needed to give. He thought for a long moment, then said, "Use it. Don't bury it again." So I made decisions I'd been avoiding. I told my wife the full story that night, no edits, no excuses. I called my son and admitted I'd failed a friend once and lived with it. I wrote a letter to the school district, not for justice but for record. Names matter. Truth matters. Jamie and I agreed to stay in touch, lightly, without pressure. Call now and then. Coffee if we're in the same city. No grand expectations. Just presence. Resolution, I learned, isn't about closing a door. It's about finally opening one you pretended wasn't there, and choosing deliberately to step through without flinching. The weeks after that felt oddly quiet, like the world was giving me space to recalibrate. Nothing dramatic changed on the surface. I still went to work, still argued mildly with my wife about groceries, still forgot where I left my glasses. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. The constant low hum of justification I'd lived with was gone, replaced by something heavier but cleaner. My wife didn't explode like I feared. She listened, cried a little, then said, "That explains so much." I hadn't realized how much of myself I'd kept walled off, even from her. With my son, the conversation was clumsy and raw. He didn't know what to say at first. Then he hugged me and told me he was glad I finally said it out loud. That alone felt like a miracle. Jamie and I text occasionally. Ordinary things. Weather. A photo of a terrible sandwich he made. There's no pretending we're picking up where we left off. That life is gone. But there's a strange peace in knowing he exists in my present, not just my guilt. I walk differently now. Slower. More deliberate. When someone asks for my opinion, I give it honestly, even when it costs me comfort. Especially then. The truth didn't free me. It grounded me. And for the first time since I was 19, I feel like the man I am actually belongs to the life I'm living. I keep the letter in a drawer now, not because I'm afraid of it, but because I respect it. 35 years late, it still did exactly what it was meant to do. It reached me when I was finally old enough to understand it. When I could no longer hide behind youth, fear, or the lie that survival equals innocence. If there's a lesson here, and I hate how Reddit posts always say that, it's this: time doesn't judge you. It just waits. It gives you decades to tell yourself whatever story helps you sleep. And then, if you're unlucky or brave enough, it hands you proof and asks who you really are. I used to think betrayal was a single act. One moment, one decision. Now I know it's a habit. It's every day you choose comfort over courage, silence over loyalty, reputation over truth. And the hardest part is that the world will often reward you for it. Jamie didn't need my apology to survive. I needed the truth to stop living half a life. That letter didn't change what happened. Nothing ever will. But it changed what happens next. So if there's someone in your past you abandoned to save yourself, don't assume time has buried it. Sometimes it's just waiting, patient, ink fading, truth intact, until you're finally ready to read it.